Hi, this is Rick Brandenburg for North Carolina State University and Turf Bugs and Rock and Roll. And we're going to start a three-part series talking about when you give out information and it enters into cyberspace and some of the negative implications that can happen from that, and how you relate that information and how you safeguard yourself as best you can. And when I first started out, my first faculty position was at the University of Missouri, and as a young individual there trying to make a name for himself, in the first year I was there, they were having the Mediterranean fruit fly problem in California, and they were making aerial applications of malathion. Well, needless to say, there was a lot of controversy over them applying that pesticide over large areas, and the St. Louis newspaper called and asked me what I thought of them spraying malathion by air. And my response, in hindsight, it was a mistake. I said, well, I don't know what the big deal is, because in St. Louis they spray malathion by air for mosquito control all the time. And the next morning, the headline on the St. Louis Globe-Democrat was, entomologist says city inundated with toxic poison, or something to that degree. And I had a meeting with the dean, which early in your career is probably not the optimal thing to be doing on a discussion like that. So, you know, that was my first lesson in dealing with the media. And then when I was at North Carolina State University, it was 1998, and the local newspaper in Raleigh was developing a section on their Sunday paper in the middle of the paper called Science and Technology. And they'd go to the local universities and they'd interview people who were doing research, and then they'd have this 4, 6, 8 page section in the middle of the Sunday newspaper talking about some of the newest and latest research that was underway. Well, they wanted to hear about our research on mole crickets, and so I was more than happy to do that. They went to the coastal areas with us, they took photographs, they looked at our research plots, they talked to us extensively. But in 1998, they continued to ask me about Pinehurst and whether or not they had mole crickets there, and I said they really don't, just a handful of them that aren't even a problem. And the reason they were asking was in 1999, the U.S. Open was being hosted by Pinehurst No. 2. So we did that, we followed up, they called me more on the phone, they asked me more questions about mole crickets, and they continued to ask me about Pinehurst, and I said no, it's not really a problem there. So the Sunday morning that the newspaper came out, I walked down the driveway, picked up the newspaper, and immediately went to the Science and Technology section, and there was nothing in that on my article. So and I pulled the paper closed, and sure enough, there was a photograph of me on the front page of the newspaper, and the headline said something to the degree of grass-guzzling crickets threaten U.S. Open at Pinehurst. Needless to say, that was a headline that grabbed my attention, and it wasn't too long after that Brad Coker and Bob Farron started to call and said, Rick, what have you done now? Fortunately, they were willing to listen to my side of the story and realized that this got out of hand. And it got ugly. The AP press picked it up, and it was spread all over the country. Pinehurst had people calling, wanting to cancel tee times because they were afraid the course was in terrible conditions. And all this happened innocently enough because I thought I was being interviewed for an article in the Science and Technology section. So my point here is I thought this was harmless. There was no way this could go wrong, and I did not know it would be an article about how Pinehurst is possibly going to go under because of mole crickets right before the U.S. Open. That was their angle, certainly not mine. So my purpose in this first initial session is you can't be too careful. Things that you say will be used for whatever purposes the editor wants to use them for. Newspapers and television stations are in the business of making a profit, and you've got to be really, really careful. And these are two instances where I learned that you can't be too careful, but that doesn't mean you don't talk to them at all. But you've really got to request that you see the final copy, and you have to sign off on it before it goes to print. Hope that helps. We'll hit you with part number 2 here next week. Thanks.